Nigel Farage is the former, Brexit leader, the great freedom fighter. You can see him on GB News, but you can also see him here each and every week on Paul Murray Live. Great man, lovely to see you. Of course, one Ashes test down, 4 to go. Let's see how it happens. But some of the celebrations are worth talking about here, and Usman Khawaja in particular. How did this become a political firestorm?
Well, I mean, you know, the Australian cricket team, which, by the way, is very, very good, but it's a great Ashes series, and they recently won, of course, the World Cup for tests. They won the game against England last week, and traditionally, Australians celebrate beating particularly the old enemy, England, in full raucous style with lots of champagne.
Bloody oath.
But that doesn't happen anymore because one of the team, Khawaja, who is a fantastic batsman and a great sportsman, but because he's Muslim, they've decided now to cancel the champagne celebrations altogether. And I made some comments on this, and Khawaja rather bit back at me and was pictured with a can of Diet Coke. And he said, no, we are now the new Australians. Well, if that means that the majority have to change their own customs and traditions for the minority, I'm just questioning whether that's a good thing or not. It seems a bit odd to me, and it raises bigger questions about why we're not prepared to stand up and defend the way we've always done things in our own cultures.
Now, I'm not going to repeat what he said, but for obvious reasons, he chose not to be quite polite in his language back to you. Not quite the surprise. You've been called better, you've been called worse in the world. But what reaction did you get when you talk about this?
Well, people say, oh, come on, you've got to be more understanding. You know, this guy's Muslim. He doesn't like to be involved with alcohol at all. Well, OK, fine. You know, within our societies, I mean, this country, these islands have been home to all sorts of migrant groups over the centuries who've come along. They've had their own private observance of their faiths, but they've generally mingled in with the rest of life. And I'm just saying that for the majority to decide, well, we'll no longer do this because of one person, is all the wrong way round. It's basically surrendering. And when Khawaja says, we are the new Australians, well, actually, he's rather agreeing with my point, isn't he?
Yeah, I would agree too. All right, some of the crowd reaction, and to be honest, I don't mind the Barmy Army ripping in, but here's some of the things that they've said of recent times. Roll the tape. They also decided to have the odd choice word about Rolf Harris. Look, I don't mind raucous carry on in the stands, but what do you think? Is there a line and did they cross it?
Well, look, you know, I have been part of the Barmy Army myself in the past, in years gone by. That's a full confession for you. I went to Barbados with them. It was a most fantastic week. I've just about recovered. Look, here's the point. That in the past, we always hear about whinging Poms. Oh, these Poms, they're soft in the head, they can't take the cricket, they can't take the sledging, they can't take the abuse. And now it's roles reversed. Now it's whinging Australians and it's British crowds that are being over the top. You know, I can assure you that when those cricketers are there at the MCG, the Australian crowd have always given English players a hard time. So, look, let's just all lighten up a bit. The Barmy Army are what they are. They're fervent English supporters, but they also, to be fair, love their cricket too. And if there's a bit of banter going on in the stands, well, the players have just got to learn to take it. After all, they're highly paid to do so. So let's all just calm down a bit, shall we?
Bloody oath. What do they say? Old Australian, new Australian. Just harden up, take it, love it and move on. All right, the climate protesters, the Just Ban Oil people that have interrupted the World Snooker Championship, but more importantly, bugger eyes around with the cities like they do here in Australia. Another slow march through London, but thankfully this one was knocked on the head within 10 minutes. Is this a sign of changing attitudes or just a mayoral election coming up in London?
Well, there is a bit of that, of course, but no, the policeman, you know, and you can see the video, the policeman did his job and did it well. But interestingly, there's a guy from the west coast of America, Mr. Nielsen, who has been one of the big backers of Extinction Rebellion and of Just Stop Oil, and he has said this weekend, no more money for these organisations, because actually these protests are now having completely the reverse of what they're intended to do. They're not raising the profile of worries about climate change. They're actually making people very, very angry. And we're beginning to see the protesters as being hysterical and half crazed. So I think the worm is turning on these ridiculous attempts to disrupt ordinary life. At least I certainly hope so.
Yeah, my oath. Here is that moment of the police officer getting involved.
I am Temporary Superintendent Brandon. As the senior officer present, I have reasonable belief that serious disruption may occur as a consequence of this procession. I'm therefore imposing the following condition. This procession will stop using the road, and everyone taking part in this procession must move onto the pavement.
Now, obviously, there's been some tough times for a fellow countryman of yours and somebody who married into the royal family, and Harry and Meghan. And I know you're wearing a black armband on the program during Talking Points this week, that Harry and Meghan, well, the Spotify deal's done and now Netflix looks like it could go as well. This is a terrible story of poverty and struggle from two very decent people.
Well, absolutely, and let's not forget the invasion of their privacy, this terrible invasion of their privacy. I mean, one should feel so sorry for them. Yes, they've left Spotify, and as they left the door, one of the senior executives described them as bleep grifters, who basically took the money and didn't deliver. And the same thing is now happening with Netflix, who are asking for more content. But there won't be any more content because these two are empty vessels. Apart from complaining about his terrible upbringing. I mean, imagine growing up in a palace with waiters, people waiting on your hand and foot. It must be so awful. No, apart from abusing his family, he's got nothing to say. And they are sinking rapidly into total obscurity. Recent opinion polls in this country now show that she and he are now the most unpopular members of the royal family, and I think our glitzy friends on the west coast of America are starting to get ever so slightly bored of them.
The struggle is real, their pain is absolute, and we feel every bit of it for them. Thank you, Nigel. We'll see you, of course, trumplive.com.au, where you'll be here with Donald Trump Jr. in a couple of weeks' time. Get your tickets for Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane.